The battlefield lay in a constant, uneasy quiet, an unnatural stillness that marked the calm before the storm. The crackling sound of the night wind was the only thing that broke the silence as Captain Mark Peterson and his loyal canine companion Max moved through the dense trees on their patrol route. It was one of those nights that felt heavier than most. Something in the air made Mark uneasy, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Mark had been a soldier for many years, enough to know when things felt off. His trust in Max had grown over time. The bond they shared was unspoken yet profound. The two had been through thick and thin, with Max saving Mark's life on more than one occasion, using his sharp senses to detect danger before it could strike. But tonight was different. Even Max, with his sharp ears and heightened instincts, seemed unusually alert, his every step calculated and cautious. As they trod further into the dense forest, Mark's gaze flickered toward the quiet village in the distance, a place that had once been vibrant with life, but now only left behind remnants of a once thriving community. There were whispers of violence here, stories of families torn apart, and the occasional reports of civilians lost in the chaos. But this evening, something about the scene felt different, empty yet filled with an eerie energy. Without warning, Mark halted. He had heard something, a faint, almost imperceptible sound that seemed out of place. He strained his ears, and then it came again, a whisper, soft yet clear enough for him to hear. "I'm sorry, Mom." Mark froze. The word sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't the wind, nor any rustling of trees. It was human, delicate, fragile, and full of regret. Max's ears perked up in unison with Mark's instincts. The dog's nostrils flared, his body tense as he glanced toward the source of sound, which seemed to come from somewhere deeper within the forest. "Did you hear that, boy?" Mark whispered, looking down at Max. The dog gave a low, throaty growl in response, confirming the unease Mark already felt. Mark crouched, his hand gripping his rifle, but his eyes darted about. "Stay close, Max," he ordered in a hushed tone. He couldn't afford to take any chances. The girl's words echoed in his mind, and the sense of urgency grew within him. They moved carefully through the thick woods, Mark's military training making every step deliberate. As they inched closer to the sound, Mark's heart pounded. Whoever this was, they were in trouble. He could feel it in his gut. Every whisper of wind, every crackle of a twig underfoot, felt amplified as he pressed forward. The whisper came again, louder now. "I'm sorry, Mom." They followed the sound, their steps cautious but steady. The further they went into the woods, the thicker the brush became, the trees taller and more imposing. Mark's eyes were sharp, scanning the area for movement, but all he saw was the silhouette of the forest stretching in all directions. And then, as they rounded a bend in the forest path, Mark stopped dead in his tracks. A small, hunched figure was sitting against a pile of rubble, hidden in the darkness. The girl was no older than 10, her clothing ragged, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She was alone. Her eyes were wide with fear as she stared at them, and for a moment Mark thought she might bolt. But instead, she simply stared, her lips trembling as she whispered again, barely audible, "I'm sorry, Mom." Mark's heart dropped. He rushed to her side, his instincts as a soldier taking over. He knelt beside her gently, his voice soft, reassuring. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now." The girl didn't respond immediately. She remained curled up, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her wide, tear-filled eyes didn't meet his. She was broken, lost in a world that had taken everything from her. "My name's Mark," he said, trying to calm her. "What's your name, little one?" She didn't answer. The only sound in the still night was her shallow breathing, barely noticeable. "I'm not here to hurt you," Mark said again, trying to ease the fear in her eyes. He reached out slowly, touching her shoulder in an attempt to comfort her, but she flinched as though expecting pain. Max, sensing the tension, sat quietly beside Mark, his steady presence offering some reassurance. "I'm so sorry, Mom," the girl whispered again, the words barely escaping her cracked lips. Her voice trembled with sorrow, and her entire body shook with fear. Mark's heart sank. This wasn't just an ordinary child lost in a war zone. There was something deeper here, something tragic. But what? Why was she alone in this desolate place? Mark carefully lifted the girl into his arms. She was light, fragile, and as he held her, he could feel her body trembling uncontrollably. The weight of the situation was beginning to settle over him, but he didn't have time to dwell on it now. She needed help, and that was all that mattered. "We're going to get you out of here, okay?" Mark promised, his voice filled with determination. Max walked beside him as he made his way back toward the base. The forest seemed endless, the path long and winding, but Mark pushed forward. He didn't know who this girl was or where she had come from, but the remorse in her voice told him one thing. She had seen something she would never forget. As they reached the base, Mark's mind raced. The girl, who had not spoken a word since her whispered apology, lay in a medic's tent, her body still trembling from shock. Mark sat beside her, keeping a watchful eye on her every move. The medics had taken care of her physical wounds, but her eyes betrayed the deep trauma that ran much deeper. The way she clung to him when he had carried her into the tent spoke volumes. She had no one else. The world she had known had been torn apart, and in her eyes, Mark saw the reflection of a soul lost in despair. He kept his distance, allowing the medics to work on her. But Mark couldn't shake the thought of the whispered apology, the sorrow that lingered in her voice. What had happened to her? What had she lost? Days passed, and Mark visited her regularly, sitting by her side, hoping for some sign that she would open up. But she remained silent, her eyes distant, lost in a world of memories she couldn't escape from. The girl, whose name Mark had learned was Lila, barely spoke more than a few words. "I'm sorry, Mom," she would whisper when Mark tried to speak to her, repeating the phrase as if it were a mantra she couldn't let go of. One evening, Mark sat by her bed, his mind consumed by the question that plagued him. What had happened to Lila's mother? "Lila," he asked gently, "what happened to your mom?" Lila's lips trembled as she slowly lifted her gaze to meet his. Her eyes, once filled with nothing but terror, now held something else. Pain, heartbreak, and a weight that only someone who had experienced unimaginable loss could carry. I was hiding," she whispered. My mom told me to run, to never look back." Mark's breath caught in his throat. The words felt like a punch to the gut, each one more heartbreaking than the last. "Why? What happened?" Mark asked, his voice soft but full of urgency. She told me to run. The soldiers, they came. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't help her. I couldn't save her." Lila's voice cracked, her face contorting with the weight of guilt. Mark's heart broke for her. She was just a child, barely old enough to understand what had happened, let alone process the trauma she had endured. Yet here she was, alone in a world that had abandoned her, consumed by grief and guilt she didn't deserve. "It's not your fault, Lila," Mark whispered. "You did what you had to do to survive. You didn't leave her. She wanted you to be safe." Lila didn't respond, but her tears fell freely now, the weight of her emotions finally overwhelming her. Mark sat with her in silence, feeling the depth of her pain, knowing that nothing could erase what she had seen, what she had lost. But he made a silent vow to her. He would help her heal, help her find a way back to the light. As time went on, Lila's situation didn't improve much. She became more withdrawn, spending hours in her cot, staring blankly at the wall. The medics could do little for her emotional wounds. Those were scars only time could heal, if at all. Mark, however, couldn't abandon her. He had made a promise, one he intended to keep. He began spending more time with her, talking to her, slowly breaking through the walls she had built around herself. They would sit in silence, sometimes just letting the hours pass, but Mark never left her side. He would bring her food, play cards with her, and tell her stories of his own childhood, trying to make her laugh, even if it was only for a moment. Then one day, Lila spoke again, though her voice was barely more than a whisper. "I want to go back," she said. "I want to go home." Mark was taken aback. "Your home is gone, Lila. It's not safe there anymore." "I don't care," she replied quietly. "I want to find my mom." Mark's heart shattered at her words. She was lost, clinging to the hope that one day she could go back, that somehow her mother would be waiting for her. "I know, sweetheart," Mark said, his voice gentle. "But we'll find her. I promise you, we'll find her." Days turned into weeks, and despite the promises Mark made to Lila, there was no sign of her mother. Mark's search was relentless. He scoured the nearby areas, talked to local villagers, and even contacted military authorities to see if there was any trace of Lila's family. But the answers were always the same. No one had seen them. The war had torn apart everything. But Mark refused to give up. "I'll never stop looking for her," Mark told Lila one evening as they sat together. "You're not alone anymore. We're in this together. Okay?" Lila nodded quietly, her eyes full of something she hadn't shown in weeks: hope. For the first time since their meeting, Mark saw a small flicker of light in Lila's eyes. She was beginning to heal. The scars would remain, but the healing had begun. And in that moment, Mark made another promise. He would protect her. He would give her the future she deserved, one where she could finally let go of the past and find peace.